I've shared this story with you before. Mother comes in to wake up her son for church. She says, it's time to go to church. And he says, I'm going to sleep in today. I'm not going to go. She said, son, you really need to go to church. It's a small congregation, and everybody makes a difference. And he said, Mom, I really just need to not go today. Maybe next week, but I really can't go today. His mother replied, well, son, you're the preacher. What is Sabbath? Genesis chapter 2, verses 2 and 3 introduces us to the idea of Sabbath. Because it says that after God created the heaven and the earth, God engaged in what activity? God was patterning himself after that creature. God rested. But then there came other deuterocanonical observations of the Sabbath. In Deuteronomy, the 5th chapter, the people of the covenant are commanded to observe Sabbath and to keep it holy by remembering their deliverance from Egypt. They are to spend the Sabbath giving thanks for where they have come from. They are to remember that God delivered them. This is the Sabbath that you and I still observe. We come to worshiping God and giving thanks to God for where God has brought us, through what God has brought us, and for where God, by faith in the salvation of Jesus Christ, will lead us. This is the description of Sabbath to which Jesus subscribes when he enters the temple, saying, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me because God has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. God has sent me to proclaim release to the captives. And so, according to this text, which Edie read in our hearing, it is another Sabbath. And Jesus is not home resting, nor off on a walk remembering or praying, but the Lord of the Sabbath is at the synagogue teaching. We know about where in the synagogue Jesus was. We know just about Jesus' actual location. It had to be somewhere between the court of the Israelites and the higher court of the priests, a few steps up. Because that is the only place where women can be. And it is the only place in the temple where cripples could be. And to Jesus, this living lesson, as you would expect, the lesson presented itself. The text does not say that a crippled woman crawled or hobbled into the temple. It says that suddenly a woman appeared in their midst with her 18-year-old affliction. In a space set aside for men, but which allowed women to come if they did not disrupt. In a space set aside for men, but where people who were other than fully able-bodied were tolerated. Jesus singled her out and called her over. What must she have been thinking? What have I done now? To what form of ridicule will I and my broken body now be subjected in the name of holiness? Jesus said to her, woman, you are set free from your ailment. Then he touched her, and when he touched her, the text says immediately her crippled condition left her, and she stood up straight and began praising God. But then, of course, the temple leader had to put his 2 cents in. Maybe this is why the ladies are not keen on inviting us to the women's event. Woman, you could have come any day for healing, and your healer, you could have healed on another day, but not on the Sabbath, not on the Sabbath. The temple leader was in charge. He ruled because he kept the rules. One could theorize that the synagogue leader was not that different than the crippled woman, however, because one might say he also had a spirit that crippled him. He was in the presence of God's new way in Jesus Christ, and yet he clung to, aha, I caught you, I got you, his ridiculous old rules. Last Sunday at the end of worship, we sang a hymn that had a couplet in it that fascinated me. Time makes old notions of good obsolete and uncouth. Meanwhile, Jesus by not just healing the woman with a crippling condition, but touching her to heal her. Stepped through centuries steeped in stigma to say, this society, this culture, this sickness, all of which have held you down, doesn't matter anymore. Through your faith in God from that which oppresses you, the Lord of Sabbath has healed you. What does a healing touch feel like? What would Valerie Harper or Alex Trebek say about God's touch? One theologian says that we should fine-tune all of our senses, our seeing, our hearing, our tasting, our touching, to include our hearts and souls to feel a healing touch from God. In the Gospel of John, Jesus healed a blind man by touching him twice. One so that he could see, and the second time so that he could understand what he was seeing. The man at first thought that people looked like trees walking around. A healing touch from God. Can you and I actually prime our senses and our souls to wait for and sense a healing touch? Did the crippled woman prime herself? I know that I said she expressed dread when Jesus called her over, but I can't imagine that the woman didn't know that Jesus was there. And I can't imagine she hadn't heard what Jesus had done for other people. The news of Jesus' miracles had spread all around the countryside. So maybe she appeared awaiting something, which means she showed up. What does showing up for God's touch take? Well, showing up for anything takes courage, doesn't it? She had to have courage to show up for God when for 18 years no other cure had worked. She had to have courage to propel her broken body into that temple courtyard in front of all of those possibly judgmental people. She was perhaps bent over so that she could only see their feet as she moved through that courtyard. But no doubt she could feel their disapproving stares. Their thoughts whispered over her head, shared over her head. Here she comes again, into this place, in that condition. You know she's had that condition for 18 years. Why doesn't God just put her out of her misery? Showing up for God's touch takes not procrastinating, doesn't it? But getting moving. The crippled lady could have rationalized, healing doesn't take place on the Sabbath, so I'll just go tomorrow. But Jesus is there today. Showing up for God's touch takes being willing to put old false beliefs of unworthiness behind you. Even in God's presence, Moses never thought that he was worthy to lead God's people out of Egypt. God calls us to put that behind us. Sensitizing yourself for God's touch means waiting 1 year, 2 years, in this case 18 years or a lifetime, and regardless of the outcome, still having faith. Regardless of the outcome, still having faith. When Jesus touched this woman, she stood up straight praising God. No doubt she probably sang, "Wonderful, Merciful Savior." She might have sung, "He has done great things for me," if she had a tambourine. But did she continue to follow Jesus? There are some who believe she may have been one of the women standing at the cross, at the foot of Jesus' cross. No doubt, being the recipient of such a miracle, her faith was strong. But what of your faith when you wait for a touch and you long for a touch? You have faith and courage to show up for that touch. And you see others receive that touch and your prayer is unanswered. Fanny Crosby wrote a hymn, "While on others thou art calling, do not pass me by. How then do you reassess your life? Has God forgotten you? Are you unworthy? I know that a lot of you may marginalize and dismiss the notorious RBG. Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She describes herself as a flaming a liberal. But I don't want to talk about her politics. I want to talk about her passion. Yes, she is an unapologetic liberal. Oh, I know she hails from the wrong coast over there where it's cold. Oh, I know she's only 5'1". Ruth was born 85 years ago in Brooklyn, New York. I should know, I was there. Her sister died when she was 6, and her mother, who was her greatest critic and her most ardent supporter, died just when she was entering high school. Ginsburg attended Harvard and then Columbia, and then graduated tied for first place in her class with her Doctor of Jurisprudence degree from Columbia. Attorney Ruth Ginsburg has spent her life fighting for women's equality, the right to equal pay, and the right for women to choose their own destinies. A Supreme Court justice since 1993, currently the court's oldest judge and the court's longest-serving judge. We all know that Ruth Bader Ginsburg has had her share of health concerns. She is now being treated for her 3rd bout with cancer. She's had a stent put into her heart. She has fallen at least twice, once while entering the Supreme Court, breaking her ribs. But she keeps showing up. This little Jewish lady with her often broken, crippled body keeps appearing in temples dominated by men. She keeps claiming her right to be healed and her right to stand up straight and raise her voice, proclaiming her faith and proclaiming her life's passion. Ruth Bader Ginsburg said she would like to be remembered as someone who used whatever talent she had to do her work to the very best of her ability, no matter what she was personally going through. She said she'd like to be remembered as someone who helped repair the tears and the tears in her society, to make things a little better through the use of whatever ability she has, no matter what. To do something outside of herself. Looking at her body and looking at her history, she remarked, so often in life, things that you regard as an impediment, a crippling, turn out to be great good fortune. God has done great things for you. God is doing great things for you. You are primed and you are waiting. What does your touch from God really look like? Let's pray. So God, we come into this holy place, always waiting and longing for your touch. Let us rejoice as you respond to us, even if it is not in the way that we had hoped. In life, death, and in life again. You have been wonderful and you have been merciful. You have done great things for us. So, help us to never give up on you. In your Son's name we pray.